The top 100 agents are the best of the best, listing and selling more than any other agent in Australia.
Sold. Congratulations, sir. Well done.
These are the practices, actions and beliefs of the most successful agents in Australian real estate. Raw, honest and completely uncut. Welcome to REB's Secrets of the Top 100 Agents.
Well, g'day everyone, it's Liam Garman here, Managing Editor of Real Estate at Momentum Media, the team that brings you Real Estate Business and the Real Estate Business Empowerment Showcase. And today I am joined by a very special guest here in the studio, the one and only Steve Carroll. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. Great to be here.
And a few flight cancellations you had this morning.
Oh, just the normal run-of-the-mill, travelling with Qantas or Jetstar. Yeah. But, 2 cancelled flights, lost luggage, 5 hours late, but got here just in time to have this chat with you.
Yeah, and it's very exciting, and we've been long looking forward to having you. You've actually recently just started a new position, very recently. So for our listeners, Steve is founder of Digital Live, and as of only a few weeks ago, the new CEO of RiSE. That must be exciting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. It's an organisation that I've admired, watched from afar, and a lot of the board members I know from my time working in real estate here in Australia. And looking forward to getting stuck in. There's been a terrific amount of work being done over the years by the founders. So, Kylie, Sarah, Chris Hanley, John Cunningham, and the list goes on.
You've got to give the shout outs.
Yep. And I just look forward to taking the baton on and taking RiSE to the next level. It's an important topic, and it's an important piece of work that RiSE is doing for this industry.
Now, it was only our podcast that we released last week with Tim McKibben, the CEO of REI NSW, and he said a statistic which I just found mind-blowing, and it was in terms particularly of taking on young estate agents that they're not necessarily well trained, because we've reduced the requirement for agents to have a 12-month course to be accredited to something that's done over a few days online. And what we're seeing is that a lot of young agents are coming on board and they're just kind of overwhelmed, really quickly overwhelmed. And Tim said a crazy statistic, which is in its first year, there's been an 80% dropout rate for new agents. And this is an industry where you can have some serious mental health issues, the anxiety, the need to deliver very hard products, very hard deadlines. We're talking about multi-million-dollar trades here. And you'd be up against it both from a client perspective and from an internal business perspective in your deliverables. And it'll be incredibly challenging for a lot of estate agents to navigate this. For people that are listening to this podcast that might not necessarily be involved day to day with RiSE, but they know the name. What does RiSE do, and how does it help? How does it help our agents?
Well, RiSE is a registered charity that the real estate industry is a part of, or should I say, many of the real estate leaders and top brands here in Australia are part of RiSE. They're leaning in and really helping and supporting RiSE achieve its objectives. Now, the objective of RiSE is quite simple. It is to promote the awareness of good health and good mental wellness. And if you can achieve that, what does it mean to the individual? What does it mean to the individual's family? What does it mean to the individual's employer? And so the job of RiSE is to promote that, but also to help agents or real estate professionals, because we obviously include property managers here, anybody who works in real estate full stop. Help those that are doing it tough. Help those that are going through a bad time. And they might be going through a bad time. They might be doing it tough because things aren't great at home, or things aren't great with their finances. Or, in the case of the many property managers I speak to, they're just over being shouted at.
Yeah.
They're just over being, abused is a strong word, but by angry landlords and angry tenants. And so what RiSE has created is the Real Care app, and the Real Care app is free for anyone to download wherever you prefer to download your apps. And what the app is packed with strategies, information, ideas, thoughts, suggestions on what you can do if you just don't feel yourself. And it's a terrific app, and I speak to, because of the nature of my job, I speak to hundreds of real estate agents and leaders and property managers on a weekly basis, and I know many of them who are using the app and they find it really helpful. Now, what RiSE also does is it runs events, and we had the event in Sydney recently, which was targeted at leaders of the industry. And the external speakers that were coming in, or came in, I should say, weren't talking about scripts and dialogues. They weren't talking about how to hustle or how to be $1 million agent. What they were talking about was how, as a leader, how do you spot someone in the team who is just not themselves? How do you know if someone's just off their game? And how do you respond to that? How do you actually deal with that? Because it's a very, very delicate topic. Now, we've got to remember, real estate leaders and all of the people that are associated with RiSE, we are not professional counsellors. So, we're not here to give them feedback on what they might do or what they should do. RiSE is about awareness. It's about showing people the right direction to go in. And there's one piece of functionality on the RiSE, on the Real Care app, which is tremendous. Agents, property managers, leaders can book to speak to a professional counsellor. They can do that 3 times a week. It's obviously it's confidential. It's with professional counsellors who have been trained to deal with people who are not okay, and the bill for that is picked up by Domain.
Oh wow!
So
wow.
it's every single real estate professional in Australia should have the Real Care app on their phone, because it might help them one day, it might help a family member one day, it might help a mate one day, and it sure can help work colleagues within their office. And that's what RiSE is.
So RiSE clearly has buy-in from some pretty big players in the industry. So you've got Domain that is supporting by providing this free and confidential counselling to people in the industry that need it. Who else do you collaborate with?
Well, all of the big brands, to varying degree, of course. And what you got to remember, Liam, this is only my second week.
Oh, I know. I'm putting you on the spot.
That's a tough question.
Sorry, yeah.
But, brands that lean in fiercely, if I can use that word, and very proactively include MRI, include CoreLogic, include Domain, include Macquarie Bank. Obviously, we had the event at Macquarie Bank recently with the 150, 160 leaders. But you just, and if I've missed anyone on that, I do apologise, and I can make the excuse as this is my second week. But you just looked at all of the leaders that were at Macquarie Bank at the leadership event in Sydney, and you had some pretty heavy-hitting CEOs that were there.
Yeah, I was there. It was the who's
you
who.
had some big leaders that were there, and they're there because they want to learn about this topic, which is without question a topic that is bigger now than it has been ever. And you saw the passion from those leaders who want to drive RiSE forward into 2025 and beyond. And that's why I'm excited about this new role I've got.
Absolutely. It was the who's who that's there. Now, just a few minutes ago, you mentioned something which I wanted to make note of because it was very interesting. It promotes, there's almost 2 wings to it. One is the good health and one is the good mental health. What do you look at in the good health side of things?
Well, look, I think one of the important things, irrespective of what industry you're in, but in real estate, and look, I've been working in the real estate space since the the 1990s, which makes me sound incredibly old.
Last millennium.
Yeah, last century.
Yeah.
And, that was originally with UK real estate agents and property managers and leaders. And I came over in 2006 to work at News Corp and then realestate.com.au. And, one of the things that I personally think is really important for anyone in our industry is to spend some time looking after yourself. Spend some time on yourself, because it is very easy to actually give your best energy, your best self to all of your customers and leave a minute amount of time for yourself as far as fitness is concerned, as far as meditation is concerned, as far as yoga and Pilates and just going for a walk and just looking after yourself. So I think, if one of the goals of RiSE is to create an industry that is just more aware of the importance of spending some personal time on yourself. And also making sure that what your family get of you is not the crumbs, the leftover, because the best of you was given to your clients and your employers. And I think that, your family, your kids, your wife, your husband, they deserve to see the best of you, as well as your customers seeing the best of you, because it is real estate.
The family aspect is really interesting, because I was reading Leaders Eat Last, the book, and Simon Sinek.
Sinek, yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it, Sinek?
Sinek,
yeah.
Yeah.
He raised a really good point with your family, which is especially if you have children and the development of children. And one thing he highlighted was it is worse for you to come home ranting and raving and yelling and frightening young children if you're incredibly stressed. It is worse than that if you just work and don't come home.
Yep.
Now, he's not saying work and don't come home, but it's about finding, well, firstly, you might need to sometimes find a new job.
Yep.
That might be the fundamental, but finding the healthy outlets that mean that you can funnel this stress and this excess energy in smarter ways. But it was just an interesting insight that he said, sometimes when you're in that state of mind, mate, if you're looking to give back to your family, the data said don't even be there, which is, it's actually quite heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm the dad of 3 grown-up children now, and I was sales director at realestate.com.au for 10 years. That was a stressful job, and I was traveling all around the country every single week of the year, and the challenge that leaders have today is with smartphones. It's very hard to switch off.
Oh, you're on 24/7.
You are.
Yeah.
But somehow your kids, your wife, your husband, they deserve to see a good side of you. They deserve to see that. And I know from being a dad of 3 kids, they look up at you they look up at parents as the role model. And what they see is what they think is acceptable. So it is very, very important. And look, I'll tell you. I think we talked about this very quickly before we went online. Every year, I take a bunch of real estate agents on a bike ride across Thailand for a kids' charity, and when I started that in 2019, I would spend hours and hours and hours riding with real estate leaders and property managers, and none of us are cyclists, so we don't ride fast. We ride at a speed where you can be chatting for hours on end with someone. And back in 2019, 2020, the topic of good health and good mental well-being was never, ever on the radar. We've just come back from Thailand, so February, March 2025. There were nearly 60 people from this industry. The 2 key topics, the 2 main topics that were talked about, number 1 was recruiting and keeping good people, and number 2 was about the stress of staying sane in this industry personally, but also dealing with the topic of health and well-being in an office. And what a lot of the senior agents and real estate leaders on this bike ride was saying to me, and this is before it was common knowledge I was joining RiSE, what they were saying is, I don't know actually how to deal with this, because it's not something that I've been taught. It's a relatively new thing, but it is a trend. It's a topic that a leader in 2025 needs to understand and needs to upskill themselves to deal with it. So if there was ever a data point, Liam, that says that leaders need to wake up to the importance of this topic, for me, that was a great data point.
So you were sales director at realestate.com.au.
Yep.
Did you have any outlets that you found particularly beneficial for yourself?
Well, I've always tried to look after myself through exercise, and that, without question, is a great release. There were times when I was believe me, when you're sales director of realestate.com.au and your prices are going up constantly, you're getting a lot of flack, and your team are getting a lot of flack, and after a while, it takes its toll. And there were times when I knew that I was not in a good place. And back then you didn't have the Real Care app. RiSE was not doing the great work it's doing. So you kind of had to overcome those challenges yourself, and that's fine. But I think that having a movement like RiSE will make it so much easier for those people who, 2 or 3 times a year, or maybe even 2 or 3 times a month, just look at themselves in the mirror and go, I'm not the best version of myself at the moment. I just need a bit of help. I just need a bit of guidance. And that's what RiSE is about.
I'm a very big advocate of combat sports and of anything that you can do in there, because it is, without a doubt, 1.5, 2 hours a day that you phase everything out of your mind. And this is the thing about anxiety. And I know the definition that a lot of psychologists say with anxiety is that because your brain has so much cortisol, it is expecting the worst possible outcome to happen. And so when you're anxious about something, some ways that manifests is that you're constantly expecting the worst outcome to happen, because your brain is doing it as a preparation mechanism, and if we go back right to the beginnings of evolutionary biology, and you're going to say, what's the worst possible thing that can happen on this hunt? Oh, okay. One of us falls down a ravine and injures themselves, or we come into contact with animals that are going to attack us. That's the notion. It was risk planning and risk mitigation, but we don't live in that world anymore. And because, like you mentioned earlier, we're 24 hours a day connected in. Your vendors can reach out to you at any time. Tenants or landlords, if you're in the PM space, can reach out to you at any time and vent their frustrations, and you're that board that they're going at. That's where anxiety comes up. And I've always been a big advocate of it. In my last job, Steve, in my last job, I was out for a while after a pretty bad panic attack. And it happened in the weirdest way. I walked into a bathroom, and then you kind of seize up and you start shaking, and then I was bang out. I was just completely out of it, because you kind of fall into that, right? And it's very hard to pull yourself out of it. And since then, it's combat sports or team sports are ways that you can have an hour and a half a day where nothing else matters in the back of your mind, and you are transported somewhere else where, if you're doing jiu-jitsu and you're like, I really don't want to get choked out. I really don't want to lose consciousness because I'm wrestling this 130-kilo dude. You are so 110% focused on that it gives you just a little bit of breathing room for the day, that you can just compartmentalize, and you can have a relaxing time with you, yourself, and your colleagues. And whether it's bike riding, like you said before, or people go and join run clubs, or you even join the local soccer team, I think that 101 is that personal health.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's really encouraging that one of the first phone calls I took after the announcement of my appointment to RiSE was actually from from Fitness First and Good Life, not from one of the gyms, but from the corporate office, saying, how can we help? How can we help the real estate industry be fitter, be healthier, have a bit of me time, and that's a conversation that I'm having right now to explore what the possibilities might be. So. Yeah, it's a big thing, and and one of the reasons why I launched the bike ride, which we've done since 2019, is to give real estate professionals an opportunity to commit to something 9 months down the track and put in a bit of a program to get fit-ish to enable them to do the ride. And without question, it has helped a lot of people who have done the ride get the balance between work, family, health, and myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just to get a little bit of insight from the man himself, a man who is now CEO of RiSE. Just before we started recording this podcast, you mentioned that you started your real estate career in the 90s explaining to agents about the rise of this scary big new thing, the internet.
Yep.
And your print products aren't going to be. You had to get on this, and I'm sure at the time you had a lot of maybe older gentlemen that were saying, "Oh, that will never happen." Talk to us about that.
Well, I work for one of the largest media. I've always worked for media companies, or 90% of my career for media companies, and I was working for one of Europe's largest media company, and we had millions and millions and millions, if not billions of pounds wrapped up in print advertising from real estate agents. And so part of our job back in the late 1990s was to work with these big advertisers that were giving the company I was working for millions of pounds of print advertising and open their mind and hopefully coach them around this thing, which I remember, this big thing called the internet. And yeah, absolutely, we had real estate leaders in their 50s and 60s, so of the vintage that I am right now, saying, "Oh, it won't take off," and a couple of wags would say would say things like, "Will I be able to wrap my fish and chips in this thing called the internet that you're talking about, Steve? And,
Yeah.
and what day does the internet get published, and so on and so forth?" And and obviously that all materialized because we moved from people looking for their next home and selling their home, which predominantly was print in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, to digital, which is what is the case today. And then bizarrely, sort of 10 years later, again, I'm talking to real estate agents, but this time in Australia, about this new thing called social media. And you're going to have to get your head around platforms like Facebook. And, and again, you had the sarcasm and the cynics who would say it'll come and go as quickly, or it'll go as quickly as it came. And of course it didn't.
No.
And I've found myself talking about trends, digital trends, to real estate agents for the last 30 years, which has given me a good understanding of the pressures that come with being in this industry.
Which is, it's so funny, but I laughed when you said, in the 90s and people, the internet won't take off, but if I was there, I might have said the same thing.
Well, if you remember, I mean, to get online, you had to use dial-up and connect it through your phone, and sometimes it would take.
It's not the 24-hour. Well, it is, but it wasn't the instant transfer of information that we would have now. Like we could all text each other immediate news, for example, or an immediate ad.
Absolutely, and and even in 2005, 2006, most of us would log off from our computers at 5:30, and we'd go home, and any email that came in after 5:30, we wouldn't pick up until the next morning.
Yeah.
And
Well, you'd have the computer sitting in the computer room that wasn't really being used.
Exactly. And if you think how far we've come in the last 2 decades, and that's great for lots of reasons, but the fact that you can lean over to your phone at 2:00 in the morning and check your emails is not healthy.
No.
But we all do it. I do it. You
Yeah.
do it. We all do it, and it's something that we need to try and get away from, I think.
Yeah, because you're pushing yourself into, and that's where the anxiety comes back up as well, because you're dealing with a stressful client, and then whereas they would have had to have dialed a landline perhaps 20, 30 years ago, and you would have had to have been there to answer the landline. Now it is literally 24/7. You don't even have 6 hours in a day where you can just decompress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, when you talk to people about the goals and aspirations of RiSE to help real estate leaders create work cultures where it is okay to say, hey, I'm struggling at the moment, and a lot of people go, that will never happen. That'll never happen. It's too much of a private thing or personal thing, and a lot of people say to me, it's a sign of weakness if you actually put your hand up and say, I'm not good. I'm not in. You're not seeing the best version of me, and so what I say to those people is, I had that when I was talking about the internet replacing print. The people who said it won't happen. I had that when I was talking to real estate leaders and agents about you're going to have to get your head around social media, because social media is going to help you build your brand and your personal brand, your business brand. It's going to help you win new listings, and people go, it'll never happen. And so when people say to me, creating a culture within real estate offices where it's just okay to be vulnerable and have those conversations, won't happen, I think it can. And I think that's why RiSE is there to give the tools to the leaders to help create those cultures.
Now, I think there's another way of looking at this as well, which is some of the maybe the prevailing way of looking at mental health is that it's a reactive thing.
Yeah.
That it's reactive, where people only start looking at mental health or discussing mental health when something bad happens. Yep. Whether it's the panic attack example before or worse cases, that's when people start discussing it. But there is also, and this goes to your good health aspect and your good mental health aspect, a proactive way of doing it.
Absolutely.
Good health and good fitness is proactive good mental health.
Yep.
Understanding things like phone addiction, understanding how to communicate with each other is a proactive way to say it. And what we're seeing now in a lot of emergency services, and I've got a lot of friends that work in emergency services, and they're really smart about it. A lot of my friends in emergency service say, hey, I don't think I've got any potential mental health risks at the moment. But hell yeah, I see psychologists and counsellors to give me confidence that in the future I am armed with the tools and the ways of dealing with it if it does manifest, which is a remarkably smart way of doing proactive mental health. So it doesn't have to be that putting your hand up, hey, I need time off, whatever. It's actually saying, hey, there are tools here that we can make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why that's why I always encourage my kids, my 3 children, to go to the dentist every 6 months for a regular checkup. You're not going to the dentist because you need to have a tooth taken out. You're going to the dentist to make sure you're on the right track for good
so you
hygiene.
don't have to have a tooth taken out. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And it's the same with chiropractic. It's the same with going to a chiropractor once every 8 weeks or 10 weeks. It's to prevent having a bad back. You don't go to the chiropractor when you've got a bad back. Well, of course people do, but it's a preventative thing as well. And look, when you get to my age, you start getting invitations from Medicare to have a free this and a free that and a free the other. And again, it's all about prevention rather than cure. And a lot of the content within the Real Care app is exactly as you've described it. It is to help you stay in a good place. It's not just about if you're not in the best place.
Now, you've also founded Digital Live. Do you want to talk to us about that?
Well, I mean, Digital Live basically started off as a charity. So that was the bike ride, and we've raised $3 million. So when I say we, the Australian real estate industry, with kind of Digital Live pushing them along, has raised $3 million for kids, homeless kids. And, you know, there are kids tonight that will have a roof over their head, that will have food to eat, that will be in a safe place as a result of the real estate industry and the work of Digital Live Ride. Since I took on my own, since I left realestate.com in just before COVID and have run my own consultancy company, Digital Live also works within real estate offices to help real estate agents. Best way to describe it, stand out online. So, you know, if you think about a Saturday night at your house and someone's got the controls to choose the movie for that night's entertainment, you flick through all the movies at a stupid pace. You're waiting for a movie just to pop out and say, I'm your movie to check out in more detail. Yeah. And when you think about that analogy, that's exactly the same when sellers are thinking about a real estate agent. They just keep scrolling. And they're looking for a real estate agent to stand out on the page, to say, I'm an agent that's worth reading more about. And through the work that I've done over the last 2 decades, I've got a really good understanding of the things that an agent can do to make sure that they have a better chance of being noticed. And so that's kind of the Digital Live arm. So it's a consultancy company. It's a charity.
That's such a good way of looking at it. Just on reflection, there have been days where I've probably spent like 30, 40 minutes to find the movie.
Yeah.
Because you're looking through and then you go through Netflix and then you move on to binge and then you're like, well, which one? And you're looking through and you can't find the one. It's a very good way of looking at it because, of course, you're going to be doing that for everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Online, well, because it's so cluttered.
I'll tell you a funny story that a number of people have heard me tell before, but during my time at realestate.com.au, we took a bunch of real estate leaders over to Silicon Valley and we went to see a number of the tech companies and we paid a visit to Uber. And this was just as Uber was really starting to ramp up and get going. And I remember a product manager in San Francisco from Uber saying that out of the 120 countries Uber operated, the most impatient users of the app were Australians. Yeah. And we were the nation that we'd order an Uber and the Uber would be 9 minutes away. And we'd say, screw that, we're not waiting 9 minutes for an Uber. We cancel and we rebook, hoping that miraculously another
100%.
Uber has appeared.
Yeah, I do that often.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And so, again, when you think about whether or not you're looking for a real estate agent or whether or not you're looking for a movie, the time that you will give a movie or a real estate agent when you're checking them out online is milliseconds, and because we're impatient, and so the job of Digital Live over the years has been to help agents and real estate leaders do the right things to make sure it's their profile that potential sellers stop at. And read more information.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, Steve, conscious that you've got a lot on your plate, so I think that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Excellent. It's been great talking to you, Liam.
That was Steve Carroll, founder of Digital Live and the new CEO, as of a few weeks ago, CEO of RiSE. That is all we have time for today on the Real Estate Business Empowerment Showcase. But until next time, bye-bye.